in today's video, I'm going to be talking about the moral injury in context of post-traumatic stress disorder. So what moral injury is? So we can say it is a significant psychological distress that the person is experiencing after they perpetrated, they witnessed, or they were unable to prevent certain events from happening, that they go against their morals. The moral injury can also happen in situations when people, they have this extreme sense of being let down, or the sense of being betrayed by significant other person. So it could be a leader, it could be someone senior at their workplace, or it could be someone significant in their personal life as well. The moral injury, it is very common in combat, and that's why most of the research around moral injury is conducted on war veterans. And the reason for that is because they're exposed to killing, suffering. They might be in a position where maybe they're unable to help civilians or maybe even other soldiers. They can be in a position where they need to follow certain orders, even though sometimes they might go against their morals. However, the moral injury can also happen in other occupations, such as doctors, nurses, social workers, aid workers, journalists, prison officers. And the reason why the moral injury is more common in those occupations, it is because these people, they hold a higher responsibility towards other people. So in the situations where maybe they feel like they made a mistake, or maybe they feel like they couldn't fulfill that responsibility, that then can cause them having the moral injury. However, the moral injury can also happen in people without actually having that correlation with their occupation. So if we think of an example of a refugee, and very often in therapy we can actually hear from refugees statements where they talk about maybe them being tortured, and then as a result of that, maybe they have given names of other people, and obviously that then can cause them the moral injury, because they blame themselves that maybe they were weak, that they haven't been strong enough to hold back those names. Another example of maybe of refugees, it is when maybe they see someone else being tortured and then they blame themselves for not actually being able to help them, not being able to save them. The moral injury can actually be a huge obstacle when working in therapy, especially with post-traumatic stress disorder. And it might happen that the moral injury will actually cause someone having distorted cognitions about what has happened. And then in those situations, then we explore in more detail what has happened, how it happened, and then we try to help the person to develop a more maybe balanced way of thinking about those events, so maybe they don't blame themselves as much. But in a therapy settings, we can also work with a person who's suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, and as part of that, they've developed the moral injury. And in some cases, it might be that people, they actually develop the moral injury because they actually committed a crime. And that's when actually having a therapy can become very challenging. So what is difficult about working with a moral injury is not what actually has happened, but how the person is interpreting what has happened. And that actually in turn is causing them distress. So in a situation where maybe the person is blaming themselves for not doing enough to save the other person, and then they will interpret that I'm a killer, I'm a horrible person, I will go to hell for that. These interpretations, then they cause the distress to the person. And that's what we're then working with. Additionally, in certain occupations like medics and war veterans, people, they can actually develop this peri-traumatic detachment from the moral injury. So they develop that in order for them to be able actually do their job. So in order for them to think rationally, in order for them to be efficient, and in order for them to actually help people. So medics, for example, again, they will detach from their emotions in order to be efficient, to be able to work, because if they would connect with their emotions at the time when things are happening, they wouldn't be able to do their jobs. But what happens in those situations when people, they actually develop certain moral injuries, they might then develop those cognitions such as I'm a terrible person, I can't even feel anything, I'm not human. So that again can add another layer of difficulty when working with post-traumatic stress disorder. And obviously this way of interpretation only increases ruminations and makes the negative emotions even more strong. And then as a result of that, people who suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, who are experiencing moral injury, they might, for example, isolate because they are worried about the judgment from other people, or they might just involved in self-sabotaging behavior, such as self-harm or addictions. But then that then leads to them not being able to work with the emotions because they constantly push those emotions away, they're blocking themselves from emotions. And then also they will never be able to feel satisfied with any of the punishments that they're setting for themselves. And because of that, that will then lead them to feel even more guilt and shame. And then again, that then only leads to more isolation and addictions. And then preventing the person from actually coming to therapy and talking about their trauma and processing their emotions. That will be it for today. And if you enjoyed this video, you might be interested in my next week video, where I'm gonna be talking about how we can help someone to actually overcome their moral injury. So I'm gonna see you next week then. Take care. Bye bye.